welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
And we are the FAIRtax Guys, coming to you from Big Daddy Studios in Gainesville, Florida. This is a pre-recorded video portion, but we will still be taking comments live as we stream live on the FAIRtax official Facebook page and on excluded.tv as well. We encourage folks to take advantage of that. That is a new platform, a relatively new platform, where a lot of your social media giants don't want to hear a particular point of view or a particular kind of content. And if it's being excluded from the big guys, you'll find it on Excluded TV. It's a very good idea to catch up with that.
Yeah, it's the result of where there's a will, there's a way.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep.
Usually where there's a will, there's a bunch of relatives wanting a piece of it as well.
That's another story.
Totally different will. But
that's a different show.
Yes, we'll advise folks to give us a call on, actually not a call, give us an email, thefairtaxguys@gmail.com, thefairtaxguys@gmail.com. When we're back on live on the 20th of March, then we can take some more calls.
And we're going to have a guest on that day, too.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
We'll check that out as well. But the FAIRtaxGuys@gmail.com is our email address. We get a lot of good feedback from there, a lot of responses that we can do here on the show, too, folks that have sent us something there. And also the FAIRtax Guys Facebook page. Advise you to leave us a comment or a question there. And we have got... I just got derailed there. No, I said that we have got here a bunch of things that people have, some of them have actually talked to us here on the FAIRtaxGuys@gmail.com, and some other things that we just kind of hear out in the field when we're talking about the fair tax. People who don't understand the fair tax, or people who really, for one reason or another, want to, demagogue it and say that there's all kinds of things wrong with it. But if you are a fair tax supporter, and if you're watching this program, we certainly hope you are, we want to try to give you a little bit of ammunition on how to answer some of these objections that will be raised to your face sometimes when you're out there advocating for the fair tax. So, Ron, a couple of weeks ago, I made you play the bad guy, the defender of the income tax.
Yes.
But today,
back in February.
Today, I'm going to let you be the good guy. Today, I will throw these objections at you, and then you can see how far out of the park you can hit them. Okay.
You're going to play the role of a fair tax denier.
A fair tax denier. Oh yeah. Now that's a new term.
We've heard this denier thing thrown around, the media. And that's the phrase I'm using. People who don't want to understand or try to snipe at the fair tax, they're the fair tax deniers.
Okay. Well, I will play one on TV. I am not a fair tax denier in real life here, but I will play one on TV here for FAIRtax Power Radio for the purpose of this thing. And this is something that Steve Hayes, in his chairman's report, he hit on this a while back.
And he does this frequently. By the way, in full disclosure, I went to the Red Book, chapters 9 and 10, and Bortz and Linder spelled out a whole bunch of these things. I made a page. I mean, show them your list that I sent you.
Oh, you got me.
I made a list of these things.
I don't know how many of these things we're going to get through on this episode.
There are like two dozen, And
we'll work at 23, actually, one short of 2 dozen. But
we're obviously won't have time for all of them, but we'll do what we can. So I'll let you pick them, and you go ahead, Mr. Fair Tax Denier, and start sniping.
Well, I don't like the fair tax, and again, this again is something that Steve Hayes hit on in quite detail. I'll lose my home mortgage interest deduction if the fair tax passes.
Oh yeah, and you're right. Steve did he has a FAIRtax Friday. It's an electronic newsletter. If you're not getting it, go to fairtax.org and sign up for it. Put in your name and address and so forth, or bigsolution.org, either one. Get your name in the database, and then you'll get the FAIRtax Friday. Steve always has an amazing report. And yeah, you're not going to get your home mortgage deduction because there'll be nothing to deduct it from. I mean, this is a big deal. The National Association of Realtors, they don't like the fair tax because it would eliminate the deduction. It wouldn't eliminate the deduction, it would eliminate the income tax. And if you don't have an income tax, there's nothing to deduct it from. And they're afraid that people are going to stop buying houses because there's not a deduction. People don't buy houses because they get a deduction on their income taxes. People buy houses because they want a roof over their heads. They want their own home because it's generally a great investment. And so people don't buy houses, brand new houses. By the way, 90% of the homes sold in this country are used homes. And under the fair tax, there's no tax on that because anything used, any used items, especially the two big ticket items, homes and cars, if it's used, there's no fair tax on it. So that'll be a huge advantage. But the National Association of Realtors, they're really afraid that most people will stop buying new homes because there's no tax deduction. For one thing, with the huge income tax, I'm having a brain fart here. The standard deduction now, it's huge. It's $24,000. I mean, most people, like Bob and I, middle class Americans, we're not going to have $24,000 worth of deductions on the income tax, so we're not going to get an interest deduction anyways. That is reserved now for the very wealthy people with huge mortgages and huge interest payments, okay?
Yes,
for the rest of us,
Steve's article pointed out that because of the standard deduction is going to be so much higher, that they only expect the returns that have itemized deductions on them used to be about 28% of all tax returns. They think that's going to be down to around 10%.
Yeah.
But of course, the realtors, you got to realize they get paid according to the percentage of the sales price.
Yeah.
So it is in their best interest to sell as expensive a homes as they possibly can. So they want to cater to that 10% that can afford a huge mortgage, where the interest deduction will help them go over the standard deduction.
And I want them to sell a lot of houses and a lot of expensive houses, and they will, because the fair tax will get this economy going like nothing they've ever seen in their lifetimes. And they're going to be very busy selling new homes. All right, so they really should get behind this, but losing a mortgage interest deduction is kind of a foolish complaint because there'll be nothing to deduct it from.
Yeah.
There will be no income tax.
That's kind of like being mad that your cents off coupon is no good anymore because the item that it was for is now free.
Yeah, that's the analogy Bortz used years ago.
Mercy.
Okay, what's next? And tell me the number so I can...
Number 4, the fair tax does not reduce federal spending. I'm against it.
You know, Mr. FAIRtax Denier, you got me on that one. The fair tax does not do anything with federal spending because the fair tax is a revenue bill. It has nothing to do with spending. Now, that's not to say that congressional spending isn't a problem. Oh, yeah, it's a big problem, and we're all very concerned about it. We wish Congress was more in tune with the American people, but the fair tax is a revenue bill. It deals with how the federal government gets its money, and it makes it a whole lot better than what we have now. It does not address spending, and I don't know of any revenue bill. For instance, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, did that address spending?
No.
No. It was tax relief, by the way. We don't call it tax reform because...
It wasn't.
Yeah, it did not reform the income tax code. It changed it, and it made it a little better, and it helps with the economy going, but it did not reform the income tax. And it also does not address spending. So, no, you're right. It doesn't address spending.
So the idea should be that no matter what your spending priorities are, you can support the fair tax as just a better way to collect the money, and then you can argue and debate and fight over how to spend it.
There you go. Yep.
See, I know a little bit.
Good job.
Number 5, the fair tax does not reduce America's tax burden. Why should I be for it?
That's right. And we're not in this to say that the government should get more or less money. The fair tax is revenue neutral. It is designed to raise the same amount of money for the federal government as is being raised right now. So when, let's say that, we're recording this in March, all right? I'm not sure when you're going to be watching this, but we're recording this March of 2019. We're trying to do a generic program so we could use it later if we need it, like if we both go on vacation or something. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. But if the fair tax went into effect next January 1st, the design is that it doesn't affect revenue. All right. Remember, the fair tax is a sales tax. When you go to the store and you purchase something, the fair tax will be included on the receipt. And you'll see there, item $77, fair tax $23. It'll be there. And the money will start flowing into the revenues from the vendor to the state to the federal government. and it will take over, and it's not going to. You're not going to wait till April 15th for everybody to send the returns in. It's going to be a more automatic, but it's designed to be revenue neutral and send the same amount of money to the federal government that they're getting now. And hopefully you're not going to choke to death here while we're doing
I'm trying not to be too obvious, but I got the worst tickle in my throat you wouldn't believe.
We're going to have to get some tickle medicine. But anyways, yeah, it's revenue neutral. It's designed to raise the same amount of money for the federal government that is now. And it's not, the FAIRtax is not going to be there to either reduce or increase the federal revenues. That's the people who will make that decision. If something tremendous and catastrophic happens and the people of America believe that the FAIRtax should be increased, then they can tell their representatives and they can do it in Congress. But it's going to be 23%, and it'll stay that way, hopefully forever.
But it's not 23%, it's 30%.
Oh, that one. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yep. And this is the difference, and this is important, folks, because I've heard this before. First off, like I said, the item that you're buying is $100. $77 for the coffee maker, $23 for the FAIRtax. Okay? Now, some people are saying, and we're saying that it's 23% inclusive. Now, first off, you maybe haven't thought about this, but the current income tax is inclusive. If you get a job at $50,000 a year, you don't take home $50,000. You take home about $37,500 if you're in the 25% tax bracket, okay? Because that $50,000 includes your income tax that has to go to Uncle Sam, and your employer takes it out, and you don't get it. So people say that you make $50,000, but you don't take home $50,000. So let's go back to the coffee maker. Coffee maker costs $100, $77 for the coffee maker, $23 for the FAIRtax. Now, some people are saying, well, if the coffee maker actually costs $77 and you're paying $23 in tax, well, that's really 30%. Okay, if you want to look at it that way, it is 30% exclusive or 23% inclusive. And I ask you two questions. What's the difference in the cost of the coffee maker? Okay, whether you call it 23% inclusive or 30% exclusive. Quick, tell me, quick. What's the difference in the cost? There is none. This is an argument for the sake of arguing. Doesn't mean a darn thing. And if you're going to be totally honest, if you're going to call the FAIRtax exclusive, how about we do the same thing with the income tax? So that if you're in the 25% tax bracket and they're taking 25% for income tax, and then they're taking the payroll tax out of that, you're actually paying like 33%. And when you do that exclusively, you're actually paying about 48%. So why don't we talk about the income tax being 48% instead of 33%? We don't hear that.
No.
Okay? So don't fall for that. This thing about the inclusive and exclusive, people use that just to submit an argument, and it goes nowhere. It doesn't change the cost of the items. Doesn't mean it doesn't mean a thing. I was going to say something else, but this is a family show.
All right, but anyway, the point that folks will need to understand is that coffee maker, the price tag on that coffee maker on the shelf will be $100.
Yeah.
It will not change. The FAIRtax is not going to turn a $100 item on the shelf into a $123 item at the cash register like a lot of the state sales taxes we've got now. They're nowhere near that much, but here in Florida the sales tax is at 7%. So if price tag's $100, you pay $107 at the register. And I can understand how people would be really freaked by the idea of a 23% sales tax.
And then some people would call it a 30% sales tax.
Yeah, but ask somebody how much tax they pay on a gallon of gasoline.
Yeah.
They have absolutely no clue how much tax they are of that. It's gas about $2.50 a gallon now. So now we're going to date that if we ever play this later. But gas is about $2.50 a gallon, and if you pump 10 gallons, you pay $25. You don't add anything on to it. So the FAIRtax is going to work just like the taxes on fuel. They are included, and the difference is when you buy gas, it'll tell you so many gallons, X number of gallons, that's the total. You don't see, your receipt does not show you how much tax you paid on that purchase. It will on the FAIRtax.
Yeah. By the way, I forgot to start my timer.
I watched over here. I've got a pretty good idea what it is.
We're not at any particular time constraints. We usually keep it to about 30 minutes, give or take. Okay, what's next?
Number 8, 23% is not enough, according to the Joint Committee on Taxation and the President's Advisory Panel. It's going to have to be a lot higher than that 23% you all are pushing.
Yeah, and these are two, the Joint Committee on Taxation is a standing committee in Congress. And in the early 2000s, during the Bush administration, the Bush administration asked the Joint Committee on Taxation, and they formed a President's Advisory Council on Federal Taxation, and they asked them to study the fair tax. But they didn't study the fair tax. They didn't take the fair tax as we've been describing it to you every week for the last 4 years, okay? They took something different. For instance, they took one which kept the payroll tax. Well, if you're keeping the payroll tax and the fair tax, that's not the fair tax. That's a very unfair tax.
Yes, the fair tax gets rid of the payroll taxes.
Yeah, and that is the most regressive tax there is, especially on the working poor. Because let's say that you got a family of 4 and they're not earning that much, and maybe they don't even pay an income tax because they're below the poverty level. They're still going to pay the payroll tax. Oh yeah, and they're not going to get out of it. There's no way to get out of it, no matter how poor they are and how struggling they are. Okay, so the payroll tax is So this committee studied supposedly some consumption tax that kept the payroll tax. Well, that's not the fair tax. And in the other one, they made some other assumptions. In other words, they did not really study the fair tax. They studied some combination
Figment of their imagination is what it was.
Yeah. They studied some combination of consumption tax and payroll tax and other tax, and it was not the fair tax. So when they came up with their conclusion, of course it was all messed up because they changed the parameters. They changed the parameters of the study. It was not the fair tax. They did not truly study the fair tax. So, when you hear about that study in the early 2000s about the Joint Committee on Taxation and so forth, sorry, it really was not the fair tax. It was some bastardization of it. So, yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, you all keep talking about, you FAIRtax guys, about how the fair tax is going to get rid of the IRS.
Oh.
Hey, number six, you still need the IRS to administer this prebate thing you guys talk about all the time.
Well, let's see. What does the IRS do right now? They collect money from taxpayers, okay? And they do send refunds. That's it. Now,
and they take your bank account and they take your house if they think you've done something wrong.
That's the next episode. Yeah, stay tuned for that one.
Oh, mercy. Excuse me.
See, more water. See, you make fun of the IRS and they get you.
Sorry.
Anyways, the prebate is a payment that will go to all legal households, and it depends on the number of people in the household. And I just happen to have prebate cards in my pocket in my new FAIRtax shirt that has a pocket here. We'll talk about that later. And as if you got a family of 4, the 2019 prebate schedule says that they're going to get $648 a month. Why? Because that is going to reimburse them for the prebate, for the fair tax they would be spending on the basic necessities, okay? Now, what does it take to send that out? I mean, they have to fill out a very simple form. This is our family. Here's the people's names. Here's the Social Security numbers, and that's it. The IRS is not going to send them anything because, for one thing, the IRS is going to be gone, right? The IRS's prime function is to collect the income tax. Well, when you eliminate the income tax, you eliminate the IRS. And nobody cries over that proposition, okay? Nobody. The IRS is universally hated because they've gotten out of control. All right, so who's going to send out the prebate? And what's the big deal, okay? The Social Security Department already sends a lot of checks out to people on Social Security and disability and things like that. I've been told before that they send there's almost 60% of the people in this country that get some kind of a payment from the federal government. I'm getting Social Security. I'm retired. My wife and I get it, we get deposits. But the prebate information is going to go to the Social Security, and based on that information, based on the number of people in their household, the Social Security will probably do a direct deposit or something like that into their bank account. All right, it's not going to take a huge bureaucracy like the IRS, because collecting the income tax is very difficult. We talk about evasion and all the other problems and all the complexity to the tax code. So collecting the current income tax is very difficult. That's why you need like 100,000 people and a $10, $11 billion operation. That goes away, all right? And the prebate is going to be very simple. You fill out the card, and then once a month you're going to get this prebate based on the number of people in your household. Simple, efficient, visible.
Sounds like a giant government handout to me. This is number 13.
Yeah, well,
wouldn't it be better just to exempt things like groceries and medical care from the tax?
Yeah, we want to go to the grocery store and find the exempt portion of the grocery store, okay? All right, we're going to exempt groceries and so forth. Well, what qualifies as an exempt grocery? How about beer? All right, how about chips? Is that considered essential? I mean, you know, you're going to get...
To some people, yeah. To others, we don't touch it.
Beer and chips.
I'll get the chips. You can keep the beer.
Okay. But when you talk about exempting certain items, whether it be food or medical care, you have to establish another whole federal bureaucracy. Do you really want to do that? Or do you just want something that is extremely simple, like the prebate? Number of people in the household, and the chart that is given to us by Health and Human Services. Very simple. If you set up a system, if you try to set up a system where certain items are exempt from the prebate, from the fair tax, you're going to have just a big mess on your hands. And
you're going to have lobbyists crawling in your hair.
You're going to have lobbyists all over the place. You're going to have people trying to commit fraud. You know, because they're going to say that, well, whatever. There's going to be a lot. It will be subject to fraud. No, that would be a terrible situation. It is much simpler to administer the prebate than it ever would be to try to figure out what's exempt and what's not. That is a disaster. Yeah, lobbyists crawling in and out of Congress offices, throwing campaign cash around. No, we don't want that. We got that now. We need to get rid of it, okay?
But that still sounds like a government handout if they're going to send me money every month. Why is that not a handout?
Because they're being reimbursed. The prebate is a nickname for the rebate. It's called the Family Consumption Allowance. And the idea is that under a sales tax, nobody should be taxed on what it costs to stay alive. Just think about that. Nobody should be taxed on what it costs to stay alive, the basic necessities of life, food, clothing, shelter, basic med care, and so forth, the basic necessities. But the fair tax is uniform throughout the economy, throughout the country. All new goods and all services will be subject to the fair tax. And so everybody, poor, rich, in between, when you buy something at the store or you pay for a service, you know, you write a check to the plumber or something, the prebate will be the fair tax will be included in that. Well, the people who anybody, any family in this country should not be expected to pay taxes on what it costs to stay alive. So I'm saying two things: they shouldn't pay taxes on the basic necessities. Then I'm also saying that the fair tax is going to be charged on everything. To take care of that, the prebate is going to go in there and it's going to reimburse them for the fair tax they would pay up to the poverty level. So yes, they will pay the fair tax on everything they purchase, but at the same time, at the beginning of the month, based on the size of their family, they're going to get a check that will pretty much equal out the fair tax on the basic necessities. So it's not an entitlement, it's to ensure that nobody has to pay taxes on the basic necessities of life, because no tax system should be so important that it taxes you before you can sustain life. That's just not right, okay? So it's not an entitlement, it is a reimbursement, much like the standard deduction or your, you know, during tax season we hear about refunds and so forth. Same idea. You pay too much tax, you get a refund. So that's it.
Well, I hear you talking about taxing services. This is number 10. That does not work. States have tried taxing services. It has been a dismal failure, and the FAIRtax is going to try to tax services. How is that going to work?
Yeah, and this is a good one in the book, and I strongly recommend you read this red book, especially chapters 9 and 10. Well, read the whole thing, anyways. And Bortz gets into this. Some states have tried taxing services, and you got to read that part of the chapter because they tried to do it in a way that they were trying this service, but on this condition. They had it so complicated that the person at the cash register, the vendor, couldn't figure out, well, am I charging the sales tax on this or not? In other words, they made it extremely complicated. FAIRtax is not like that. The FAIRtax is very simple. Whether it's the plumber, the electrician, any other service, the tax service, whatever it is. Of course, there won't be any tax service if we have the FAIRtax, at least not for individuals. But whatever service it is, you need an attorney for a reason, you pay the attorney, okay, the FAIRtax will be charged. And it's very simple, whatever it is, it's 23% inclusive, what the bill is. And that's it. There's no special conditions, there's no exemptions, things like that. The FAIRtax will be charged on services. It's not going to be complicated like some of these states tried and abandoned because they made it so complicated it was impossible, okay? So they're using examples there that are not really like the FAIRtax. Yeah. But now services will be taxed.
But now that attorney will no longer have to file an income tax return, because what do you pay for legal services? Part of that ends up at the IRS as the attorney's income tax.
Yeah.
And so he just charges the FAIRtax and sends it in rather than sending it in as income tax.
Yeah.
But the cost of the income tax system is still embedded into the cost of services.
Yeah, right
Plumbing
now,
services, legal services, lawn care services, any kind of service. You can get a haircut.
That's right.
Part of what you pay for a haircut ends up at the IRS because it's part of the barber's income tax now.
Yeah.
So,
because everybody is subject to the income tax, and the complexities of the income tax right now, you can't get away from it. And it insinuates its way into every aspect of our lives, whether personal or business. And it's there, and it costs us a lot of money.
Yeah, you don't see how much it costs for materials and labor when you buy something. So you don't see how much it costs for taxes when you buy something. You don't see the cost of any individual cost of doing business when you buy the product or service. And the FAIRtax just gets rid of all the taxes that are now, charges the FAIRtax at the retail level, end of story, no tax returns, no withholding. That's good. I like that.
That sounds pretty simple.
You're going to turn me from a FAIRtax denier into somebody who likes that now.
FAIRtax deniers beware.
Well, if my timing is correct, we got about 2 minutes left here, so we got a few more of these points. We'll continue this on a future episode of FAIRtax Power Radio.
Yeah.
But for now, the FAIRtaxLogoStore.org has got, you say it's got some new stuff over there?
Well, yeah, we got this neat little item. And in fact, I think they might be sending this out. If you make an order of over a certain amount, you might get it's a screwdriver. All right, it's got FAIRtax, FAIRtax.org, real tax reform, simple, efficient, and visible, okay? And it's got some little screwdriver bits. And you take one out and then put it in you just simply take one out.
Recovered by Alabama.
Yeah, and there's one on the floor, but that's all right. And you put it in there, and then you got yourself a little screwdriver. I wouldn't try to rebuild an engine with it, but, in a pinch, it'll come in handy. So that little item is in there. We have buttons. These things are very handy for demonstrating your support for the FAIRtax, all right? Several types of pens, and as I mentioned before, we've got the prebate cards. These are very popular. Basic information about the FAIRtax on one side and the prebate schedule on the other side. People like to see how much they're going to get in the prebate. I mean, that is a big deal, Retired couples like Bob, Bob and his wife and my wife and I, $479. Hey. That's not bad.
I can go skydiving with that.
Yeah, I could live with that. Get rid of the income tax and so forth, so I get my entire retirement check. Yeah, I can live with that. Okay, but there's all kinds of materials and shirts with pockets. I know that sounds like what is he talking about? But this is recently we've been able to get FAIRtax shirts with pockets.
They've been having the polo shirts. They don't have any pockets in them.
Yeah, yeah. And so I like this because I really need a pocket. And I have seen my congressman, I can't get him to wear a FAIRtax shirt, but he keeps these prebate cards in his shirt pocket. And when somebody asks him about it, pulls one out and gives it to him. Love my congressman.
Amen.
Hopefully we'll have him on the show here before too long.
We're going to work on that here before too much longer. All right. Well, let's just go to about wrapping up this edition of FAIRtax Power Radio.
Good heavens.
Again, we remind you our email address, thefairtaxguys@gmail.com. You can leave us a comment on our FAIRtax Guys Facebook page as well. And always tune in at 11:30 Eastern Time on the FAIRtax official Facebook page for FAIRtax Power Radio. And until we meet again, I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
The FAIRtax Guys reminding you that the FAIRtax is America's big solution. And once you understand it,
you'll be
try it again.
You'll demand it. Don't be a FAIRtax denier.
Oh, these income tax forms are way too complicated. There's got to be a better way. Who are you?
We're the FAIRtax Guys.
We've got a big solution for you.
What's that?
It's the FAIRtax. Completely eliminates the federal income tax system as we know it. No more withholding, no more payroll taxes, no more tax returns ever, no more IRS. All gone. And I guarantee you, once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
Yeah.